position. Breathe deeply. Let each word, little by little, slow down your thoughts and let this story simply take you to a peaceful, serene, safe place, away from the noise of the world, away from the worries of the day. This is the story of Emily Carter, a simple woman with a sweet heart, with a shy smile, and a whole life dedicated to honest work. Emily was never someone the world used to notice. It always went unnoticed. He was the kind of person who came and went from places without really being seen. He lived in the small town of Willow Creek in the interior of the state of Virginia, in the United States, a place with wide streets, trees that sway gently to the sound of the wind, and where mornings arrive slowly, always accompanied by a fine mist, almost poetic, that covers the fields and sidewalks. Emily lived in a simple little house, made of old wood with peeling paint, but very cozy, with that delicious smell of freshly brewed coffee, where she woke up every day well before the sun appeared on the horizon. His routine was always the same. Get up, make a strong coffee, watching for a few minutes the sky that was gradually getting lighter, while listening to the birds start to sing outside. Then she would put on her old navy blue uniform, adjust the scarf in her hair, and head out for another day of work as a maid. He had been working at the Thompson family mansion for almost 12 years, one of the richest families in the region. The house was breathtaking. Huge, with huge glass windows, perfectly manicured gardens, and an entrance with those white columns that look like something out of a movie. Emily knew every corner of that mansion, every detail, every step, every piece of furniture. She took care of the cleaning, the organization, the smell of the house, the soul of that place. But despite living surrounded by so much luxury, Emily's life was always very simple. The salary he received was just enough to pay his bills, take care of his old car, and buy basic groceries. I never complained. I was grateful, even with so little, even leading a life that for many could seem limited. She believed deep down in her heart that life was made up of small moments of peace, hearing the wind in the trees, to smell the bread baking, watching the sunset dye the sky orange and gold. And so Emily's days went by in a serene, predictable cycle where nothing great ever seemed to happen. But, as life itself likes to do, sometimes when we least expect it, fate silently begins to prepare something that will change everything forever. And that's exactly what happened to Emily. That morning, it seemed like just another ordinary day. The sky was cloudy. The wind blew slowly, dragging dry leaves along the sidewalk. Emily arrived at the Thompson mansion at 7 a.m. sharp, as she did every day. He pressed the small button on the intercom, heard the sound of the gate unlocking, and entered. The garden was covered in tiny drops of dew, which sparkled like tiny crystals in the dim morning light. She took a deep breath. That smell of wet earth, mixed with the scent of freshly pruned flowers, brought a peace that was hard to describe. Slowly, he walked to the side door of the mansion, took out his key, turned it, entered. The inside of the house was silent. The family was still sleeping, and as usual, she started her routine. He went to the laundry room, separated the cloths, the cleaning products, organized his cart, and he began his journey. It started with the main room, the one with the double-height ceiling, crystal chandeliers, soft rugs. With each stroke of the cloth, he observed his own reflection in the shiny surfaces and smiled discreetly. It wasn't his world, but somehow it was part of him. As he cleaned, his thoughts wandered. I thought about life, about the choices, about the dreams I once had, about the ones I put off until later. And sometimes he wondered, does life have any surprises in store for me? Maybe not. Perhaps yes. That morning, without her knowing, the answer to that question was about to arrive. While cleaning Mr. Thompson's office, something caught his eye. One of the bookshelves looked a little crooked, almost imperceptible. But as she knew every corner of that house, she noticed immediately. He approached. He looked more carefully. He noticed that, right at the base of the shelf, there was a small gap, something he had never noticed before. Curious, she crouched down, ran her hand over it. He felt that one of the wooden panels was a little loose. Gently pulled, and to his surprise, the panel opened, revealing a sort of hidden compartment behind the bookshelf. Emily's heart, which always beat at a calm pace, accelerated even as she tried to take a deep breath, to remain calm. Inside the compartment, there was a box, a dark wooden box, old, with aged metal details. She stared for a few seconds. What could that be? Why was it hiding there? He took a deep breath, looked around. The house was silent, as if time, for a few moments, had stopped. Slowly, he pulled the box. She was heavier than she imagined. He placed it on the carpet, and with slightly trembling hands, he opened the lid, and at that very moment, Emily realized that her life would never be the same again. The lid of the box slowly opened, creaking, emitting that soft sound of ancient wood, an almost hypnotic sound that seemed to blend with the light breath of the wind outside. For a few seconds, Emily stood still, just watching, breathing slowly, as if, by opening that box, he had, without knowing it, unlocked not only that compartment, but also a new chapter of his own life. Inside the box were papers, envelopes, and deeper inside, something that, at first glance, shone so brightly that she had to blink her eyes, adjust her gaze to make sure she wasn't imagining things. It was a small fabric bag, wine-colored, with a golden ribbon already a little faded. Emily, with trembling hands, but trying to remain calm, carefully pulled out that bag. She weighed more than she looked. Very delicately, he opened the ribbon and slowly turned the bag over onto the soft carpet, and then small objects started sliding, falling, making a dry, metallic, soft sound. Coins. Gold coins. Ancient coins. Perfectly preserved. Some with inscriptions so old that she couldn't even decipher them. The glow, even in the soft light of that cloudy morning, was almost magical, hypnotizing. Emily took a deep breath, brought one of the coins closer to her eyes. He observed every detail, and even without understanding much, I knew that wasn't just anything. He then tried to turn his eyes to the rest of the box. Next to the coins, there was an envelope, old, with the name Robert Thompson written in an elegant, classic handwriting that you hardly see anymore. Robert Thompson, the family patriarch, deceased almost 20 years ago. Father of the current Mr. Thompson for whom she worked. Emily held the envelope, took a deep breath, and slowly peeled off the wax seal, already brittle with age. Inside, there was a letter. She carefully unfolded the paper, which creaked, showing signs of age, and he began to read, slowly, letting each word sink in, filling the silence of the house. If you found this letter, it means that somehow the secret I've been hiding for all these years has been discovered. No one in my family knows about this, and maybe that's for the best. These coins were inherited from my grandfather, who brought them from Europe at the end of the 19th century. They are more valuable than any possession we own today. But I never told anyone that. I didn't trust. I didn't think they would know how to appreciate it, so I hid it here. And if fate wanted you, whoever you are, to have found, may this fortune bring peace, security, and a better life. Whoever finds it, use it wisely, with love. Robert Thompson. When she finished reading, Emily felt her heart beat differently, as if, for a few seconds, I was no longer in that office. I was no longer cleaning, organizing, invisible. For an instant, it was as if the universe had looked directly at her and said, I see you. I haven't forgotten you. Emily took a deep breath, closed her eyes, clutched the letter to her chest. He felt a mixture of gratitude, disbelief, fear, hope, all at the same time. But when I opened my eyes again, she realized that the box still held more secrets. There, right at the back, was a small notebook, leather-bound, aged, with gold details on the edges. She picked it up, carefully, opened it to the first page, and found a list, names, dates, and values. It was an inventory, a detailed inventory of all coins, of every piece, with descriptions, and next to it, the estimated value of each item. Emily turned the pages sliding her fingers over Robert Thompson's impeccable, almost poetic handwriting, and then his eyes fixed on the total written on the last page. When he read that number, he had to close his eyes for a few seconds, taking a deep breath and assuring herself that she wasn't dreaming. The value converted to current days exceeded $3 million. For a few seconds, maybe minutes, time simply stood still. The only thing Emily could hear was the sound of her own breathing, slow, deep, as if unconsciously her body was trying to process what was happening, trying to balance that flood of emotions that, until then, were totally unknown to her. Because until that moment, she was just Emily, the maid, the invisible woman, the one who always lived in the shadows, behind the scenes of other people's lives. But now there was a secret in her hands, a secret that could change absolutely everything. For a few minutes, she sat there, looking at that box, at those coins, at that letter. The mind went back and forth between thoughts. What do I do now? Should I tell someone? Is this mine? Does this belong to the family? Or was it supposed to be mine? He remembered the final words of the letter. Whoever finds it may use it wisely. And then a thought began to form, slowly, inside her. A thought that at first seemed impossible, absurd, distant, but little by little, it was taking shape. It was becoming real. What if that was in fact a gift? A gift from the universe, a silent reward for all the years of invisible work, of struggles, of hidden tears. Emily stayed there for a few more minutes, breathing deeply, watching, feeling, until slowly he started putting everything back inside the box. The coins, the notebook, the letter, carefully, as if guarding something sacred, precious. Closed the lid, put the bookcase panel back in place. He got up, he smoothed his uniform, adjusted the scarf in his hair, and as if nothing had happened, he continued his cleaning. But deep down, I knew that from that day on, your life would never be the same again. The days in Emily's life were always like the sound of the wind passing through the leaves of the trees. Smooth, repetitive, peaceful, sometimes even monotonous. And on that day, even with everything she had discovered, she maintained, at least on the outside, the same pace, the same rhythm, as if her own existence was part of that silent, discreet, invisible scene. With every step he took through the mansion's corridors, his gaze swept over every detail. The sound of his own footsteps on the polished wooden floor seemed louder than usual. Or maybe it was the sound of his own thoughts. Now, more intense, more questioning. And now, what do I do? She cleaned, folded, organized, as his mind spun slowly in circles, searching for answers that the world seemed to be in no hurry to give him. The smell of freshly brewed coffee in the mansion's kitchen. It mingled with the smell of polished mahogany furniture, with the delicate perfume coming from the garden, and the light, almost imperceptible smell of old wood, which now had another meaning, because she knew that behind one of those walls, a secret, a treasure, rested silently. For a few hours, he tried to convince himself that he could simply ignore what he saw, pretend nothing happened, return to the routine, as if that moment had never existed. But there was no way. Something inside her had changed, silently, deeply, irrevocably, and it wasn't just because of the money, the coins, the possibility of wealth. No, it was much more than that. It was as if, for the first time in her entire life, she had felt viewed, chosen, valued. The universe, God, destiny, or whatever name we want to give it. Somehow, he had looked right at her and whispered, "I see you. I never forgot you. I always knew your worth, Emily." Took deep breaths, repeatedly, almost as if, unconsciously, she wanted to slow her heart, calm the mind, and allow that reality, little by little, to settle in, settling inside it, like a stone that, after being thrown into the lake, slowly finds the bottom. The clock was almost noon when he heard the usual sounds coming from upstairs. The creaking of Mr. and Mrs. Thompson's footsteps, waking up, descending the stairs, beginning another day of the luxurious life they led. Emily quickly arranged the cloth on the cleaning cart. He checked to make sure he hadn't left any trace of what he had discovered, and with a smile, that same shy smile, trained, automatic, greeted the boss's, "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson." "Good morning, Mr. Thompson." "Good morning, Emily." The lady replied, quickly looking at her cell phone. "Coffee, please." "Of course, ma'am," he replied, keeping his voice as calm as ever. And so, the day went on. Between prepared coffees, changed sheets, rearranged flowers, the outside, everything remained exactly the same. But inside, a silent revolution was taking place. Emily couldn't help but wonder, what exactly did that letter mean? Those coins, that secret hidden for decades. Would it be legally hers? Morally, was it right? What if the Thompsons found out? What if that was a gift? Something that was meant for her, and that, somehow, only she was meant to find. The questions came like waves, soft, constant, sometimes bigger, sometimes almost imperceptible, but never stopped. When he finally finished his shift, late in the afternoon, he left the mansion as he did every day. He took his old car, that brown sedan from the 90s, that always made a strange noise when he started it. As I drove through the quiet streets of Willow Creek, I observed the houses, the trees, the birds, and he tried somehow to understand what the universe was trying to tell him. When he got home, he opened the wooden door, which creaked as always. She took a deep breath, left her bag on the hook, and as always, turned on the kettle to make her tea. The scent of chamomile, little by little, spread throughout the room, bringing that feeling of comfort, of coziness. He sat down in the old armchair near the window, and looking at the sky, now tinged with orange and golden hues, he let his thoughts simply flow. What if this is really for me? What if this is the only chance I have to change everything, to live and not just survive? He picked up the notebook he always left on the table, the one where he wrote his lists, his expenses, his dreams. And for the first time, a new page began. At the top, he wrote in very large letters, "You see," and just below, he started to list. Slowly, slowly, letting each thought, each possibility arise, flow naturally. Buying a new house, pay off all debts, helping her sister who always fought alone, helping that animal shelter she always wanted to but never could. Take a trip, maybe Paris, or maybe just see the sea, for real, for the first time. Have security, peace, and who knows, open a small coffee shop with books, flowers, and big windows where people could sit, relax, and be happy. With each item written, a different smile appeared on Emily's face. Shy smile, but full of hope. Of a hope that, until that day, she didn't even remember what it was like. And then, after a few minutes, or maybe hours, because time in that state seemed to no longer exist, she closed the notebook, took a deep breath, looked at the ceiling, at the sky, and he said in a low voice, almost like a whisper, "Thank you, whoever it is, whatever it is, thank you." And that night, for the first time in many years, Emily fell asleep with a light heart, full of possibilities, and who knows, maybe he even dreamed. She dreamed of a life where she was no longer invisible, where she was no longer just the maid, but yes, someone who finally had been chosen by life. The next morning arrived, calm like all the others, with the sky painted in soft shades of blue and gray, and that unmistakable smell of damp earth, of leaves wet with dew, of freshly brewed coffee that slowly spread, filling every corner of Emily's small house. She woke up, not with the sound of the alarm clock, but with that silence, that kind of silence that only exists on quiet mornings in the countryside. A silence that, in truth, is not the absence of sound, but yes, the presence of all that is serene. The birdsong, the wind slowly passing through the trees, the soft creak of ancient wood. For a few seconds, she remained lying down, with eyes closed, breathing slowly trace of anxiety, and then that thought came back. The box, the coins, the letter, the secret that now was part of his life. Emily opened her eyes and looked at the ceiling. For a few moments, he wondered if it had all been a dream, if that discovery wasn't just a figment of his imagination. But no, it was all there, as real as a soft sunlight that little by little invaded his room through the gap in the curtain. He got up slowly. He stepped on the cold floor, and as he did every day, he put the kettle on the fire. Meanwhile, he made the bed, opened the window, and let the fresh morning air enter, circulate, fill, renew. The smell of mint tea mixed with the smell of fresh bread coming from the neighbor's house. It filled the air, creating that feeling of home, of comfort, of security. He sat down at the table, picked up his notebook, the one where, the night before, he had written his list of what-ifs, opened on the same page. And he stood there, looking, letting every word, every possibility sink deep into his mind. Could this really be my life now? Am I worthy of this? He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and he allowed himself, for the first time, to imagine. See yourself within a different life, a life where she no longer had to worry about every penny, where she could wake up without that constant weight on her chest, that fear, that butterflies in your stomach, that for so many years accompanied her silently, day after day. Emily then stood up, went to the small bookshelf, and he took an envelope. In it, I kept all my cards, notes, and contacts from doctors, markets, neighbors, and from a lawyer, a simple lawyer from the city who she had already looked for a few years ago when she needed to resolve a problem related to a rental contract. His name was Michael Peterson, a man in his 60s, gray hair, calm gaze, serene speech, the kind of person who transmits confidence, security, just by being around. Maybe it's time to talk to him. She put the card in her purse, finished her tea, and got ready to leave. His heart was beating, calmly, but at the same time, with that slight anxiety, that mixture of fear and hope that arises when life suddenly opens a door that you never imagined you could go through. He started the car, that old engine noise. That was part of his routine, and he walked slowly through the quiet streets of Willow Creek. The trees swayed gently. The sun filtered its rays through the leaves, creating golden designs on the asphalt. And in that moment, everything seemed more beautiful, lighter, more full of meaning. Arrived at Michael's office, a simple building made of red bricks with large windows and a little wooden sign on the door, handwritten, Michael Peterson, attorney at law. Here, every story matters. Emily smiled, took a deep breath, and walked in, the sound of the door, that hanging bell, the smell of fresh coffee mixed with the smell of books, of old papers. Michael, sitting behind a desk full of organized papers, looked up, and upon seeing her, he gave her a gentle smile. "Emily," he said with that calm and welcoming voice, "what a nice surprise to see you here." "Is everything okay?" She smiled back, a shy smile, but sincere. "Yes, you are, Mr. Michael. Well, I hope you are," he replied, not knowing how to begin. He gestured, pointing to the chair across from him. "Please, sit down. Let's talk." Emily settled in, arranged her hands in her lap, took a deep breath, and then he started counting. He told everything. Slowly, slowly. No rush, allowing every detail to be carefully described. The tone of voice, soft, calm, almost like someone telling a dream. Michael listened attentively, without interrupting, just nodding his head from time to time. The face maintained that serene expression, but at the same time, with traces of surprise. After all, stories like that weren't exactly common. When Emily finished, she was silent, looking at him, waiting. Any reaction, any response. Michael crossed his arms, took a deep breath, and, for a few seconds, he looked out the window, as if organizing his own thoughts before speaking. Then he turned back to her, and with that deep, calm voice, he said, "Emily, what you found is indeed something extraordinary." He paused, looked her straight in the eyes, and continued, "Legally, we need to analyze a few points. It depends on how it was left. If there is a formal will, if this letter has any legal value, if it was, in fact, a hidden donation, or if it could be considered part of the family's assets." Emily listened attentively, the heart beating at a rhythm that she tried at every moment to slow down. However, he continued, softening his tone even further. "From what you told me, there is indeed a loophole. This letter, if it is authentic, could indeed be considered a declaration of will, especially if the assets were never officially declared by the family." He leaned back in his chair, interlaced his fingers, and concluded, but most of all, "Emily, there is something else here, something that goes beyond the law, beyond the papers, beyond any rules." She looked at him, curious, anxious, silent. Michael smiled, and he said, almost in a whisper, "There is what life shows for you." And in that moment, Emily felt so intensely, so deeply, so overwhelmingly, that she had to close her eyes, take a deep breath, and let that truth, that possibility, that new reality settle deep inside her chest. Because sometimes life simply chooses for a few moments. The office was completely silent. The kind of silence that doesn't weigh, doesn't bother, but yes, it calms, it comforts, it envelops. Emily remained there, sitting with her hands resting in her lap, looking at your own hands as if somehow I tried to understand how life unexpectedly put something so great in my path, so unlikely, so unbelievable, right there in your hands. Michael, with that calm and leisurely manner, stood up. He walked over to a small bookshelf in the corner of the office. He slowly ran his fingers through the books, as someone who is looking for not just a book, but maybe an answer, a path, a possibility. He picked up an old volume with a leather cover. He opened it, leafed through it, until he found a specific page, and he returned calmly to his table. He sat down, took a deep breath, and looked at Emily with that look that mixes compassion, wisdom, and a rare delicacy. Emily, he began in a low tone, almost as if whispering so as not to break the spell of the moment. Life sometimes likes to play hide and seek. She hides gifts, opportunities, miracles in the most unlikely places. He paused, slowly running his fingers along the edges of the book, and it continued. And only those who look carefully will find it. Those who live with an open heart. Those who, even though they are invisible to the world, continue walking, continue believing, continue doing good without expecting anything in return. Emily felt a lump in her throat, the kind of lump that doesn't come from sadness, but yes, from the mixture of gratitude, surprise, and that gentle touch of hope that arrives quietly and occupies a space that, until then, was empty, without her even noticing. Michael then pulled out a notepad, and he began very calmly to make some notes. As he spoke, slowly, carefully, we need to act very intelligently, very cautiously. First, we will analyze the letter, the authenticity of the writing, the date, the materials, everything. Then, we will evaluate if there is any record of this treasure, if at any time it was declared, cited, documented by any member of the family. He stopped, looked straight into her eyes, and with a slight smile said, "And if there isn't, then that, my dear Emily, can indeed be considered yours." The word yours echoed, slow, soft, deep, within her heart. So simple, so short, and at the same time, so powerful. Emily took a deep breath, and for a few seconds, let that thought fill every space in her mind, every corner of your soul. Something that, for the first time in my life, is mine. Michael noticed that moment, that silence full of meaning, and with all the delicacy in the world, he added, "Of course, it will be a process. It takes time, it takes patience, but looking into your eyes, Emily, I tell you, if there's anyone who deserves this, it's you." She felt her eyes well up, but not out of sadness, not from pain, but something that for a long time she didn't even remember what it was like to feel: joy, hope, gratitude. For a few minutes, or maybe more. They stood there, talking, drawing possibilities, planning the next steps. Everything calmly, lightly, no rush, as if somehow the universe itself was there, present, witnessing, smiling, and secretly rooting for her. When they finally said goodbye, Michael gently held Emily's hands. He squeezed, looked into her eyes, and he said, with that voice that sounded like a hug, "Emily, remember, life sometimes takes time, but she never forgets who chooses to live with love, with honesty, with faith." She smiled, a smile full of emotion, and replied, "Thank you, Mr. Michael. Really, thank you." He left the office, and as he stepped onto the sidewalk again, he took a deep breath. The morning wind, now cooler, seemed to caress her face, as if to say, "Come on, everything is starting to change." He got into the car, and before starting the engine, he stayed there for a few minutes, looking at the horizon, watching the trees slowly sway, the leaves dancing, as if celebrating together with her. That moment, and for the first time in a long, long time, Emily allowed herself to dream. Allow yourself to imagine a different future, a future where she would no longer be invisible, forgotten, disposable. But yes, someone who finally was chosen by life. The way back home looked different. The same streets, the same houses, but everything seemed more beautiful, lighter, more full of life. Children playing on the sidewalks, the smell of bread coming from the bakery on the corner, the sound of church bells in the distance, and that sky, blue, serene, almost poetic. When he got home, he parked, he got out, and before opening the door, he looked at his little house, that simple little house, made of wood, that for so many years was his refuge, his fortress, his home. And he whispered softly, almost like a prayer, "Thanks." He came in, put his bag on the hook. He took off his shoes, and as he did every day, he went to the living room window. He opened and let the wind come in, fill every space, every corner. He sat down in the old armchair, and for the first time, he didn't take the notebook. He didn't take the bills or the lists. It just stood there in silence, listening, feeling, breathing, the sound of birds, the smell of grass, the wind blowing through the leaves. Everything seemed more alive, more present, more real. And in that moment, Emily realized something that perhaps would be the greatest wealth of all. That even before any fortune of any gold coin, from any letter or will, she was already rich, rich in life, rich in love, rich in peace, rich with hope. And now life was just putting in writing. The next day dawned slowly, as if time itself had decided slow motion. The skies, still tinged with soft shades of gray and blue, seemed wider, more open, more full of possibilities. Emily woke up, slowly. No rush, without that weight on her chest, that tightness that, for so many years, accompanied her, silently, day after day. I remained lying down, looking at the ceiling, watching the soft morning light slowly pass through the gaps in the curtain, drawing small golden beams that danced in the air, along with the dust particles. The silence of the morning was not empty. It was full of sounds. The bird song, the gentle rustling of the leaves outside, the almost imperceptible sound of the kettle starting to boil in the kitchen, and for a few minutes, or maybe longer, Emily just stood there, breathing slowly, feeling deeply. The presence of the moment. Everything is changing, he thought, with a slight smile. But at the same time, everything is exactly where it should always be. He got up, walked into the kitchen. He prepared his chamomile tea, like he did every morning. The smell, so familiar, so welcoming, seemed that day even sweeter, more comforting, as he slowly stirred the liquid in the cup. He looked out the window, the leaves swaying, the wind passing by, and that feeling that for the first time, life was smiling at her. He sat at the table, and without even realizing it, his fingers slid to his notebook, the same one where days before she had written at the top of the page 2 simple words, but so powerful, see. He opened the notebook, looked at that list, and with a slight smile, he began delicately to add a few more dreams, a few more possibilities. Have a garden full of flowers, take cooking classes, learn photography, visit the Grand Canyon, sitting on the sand and watching the sea until the sun disappears on the horizon. With every word, with every line, it was as if his inner world was little by little expanding, opening up, gaining color, texture, shape. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about a hidden fortune. It was about freedom, about finally being able to choose. And as her thoughts floated, soft, light, lulled by the sound of the wind, the phone rang. That sound, which, for a few seconds, gently broke the morning silence, but not abruptly, not intrusively. It was like a little call, a reminder that, yes, the world outside went on. But now, from a new perspective, Emily answered, "Hello." His voice, calm, soft, echoed on the other end of the line. On the other side, Michael's familiar voice, calm, slow, welcoming. "Good morning, Emily. I hope I'm not bothering you." She smiled, a smile that even he could feel, just from the intonation, not at all. He replied, holding the cup with both hands, feeling the comfortable warmth spread through his fingers. "You can talk." Michael then explained that the afternoon before, after she left, he couldn't simply ignore what he had heard, and he spent hours reviewing books, consulting records, searching through old archives. And I had discovered something very interesting. Emily, he said, with that tone of someone delivering news that is loaded with meaning. I found old records, transaction documents, and in fact, nowhere is there any mention of these coins, of this treasure, in the assets declared by the Thompson family. She remained silent, absorbing every word, every pause, every detail. Michael continued, "This reinforces the possibility that, yes, this treasure was a personal secret of Robert Thompson, something that he clearly did not want to be integrated into the family estate." He paused, and in an even softer voice, he added, "Which means, Emily, that most likely this is yours." For a few seconds, maybe minutes, time seemed to stop. The sound of the wind, the singing of the birds, the smell of chamomile tea, everything became more intense, more present. Emily closed her eyes. He took a deep breath and he let that reality settle slowly inside his chest. Michael then explained that, of course, the legal process would still take some time, that some procedures would be necessary, some documents, some formal analyses, but deep down, the path was already set. You, he said in an almost poetic tone, found what was kept hidden, perhaps waiting for you for all these years. She smiled, a smile full of gratitude, of peace, of something that she didn't even know still existed inside her. "Thank you, Mr. Michael. Really, thank you." They ended the call, and for a few minutes, Emily stood there, holding the phone, looking out the window. The sky seemed bluer, the wind softer, life more beautiful, and for the first time in a long, long time, she allowed herself to close her eyes, take a deep breath, and simply feeling that everything was finally falling into place, that sometimes life doesn't forget. It just takes a while because he is preparing something much bigger than we ever imagined. The day went on as if time itself had decided to move more slowly, softer, more gentle. The wind blew calmly, passing through the leaves, bringing that sound, that whisper of nature that fills, comforts, cradles. Emily remained seated in her old armchair near the window, holding a cup of tea, looking simply at the movement of life outside, the leaves dancing, the birds flying, the sun filtering its rays through the branches, drawing golden shapes on the ground, and that smell, so familiar, so welcoming, of wet earth, of flowers, of coffee coming from the neighbor's house. Everything seemed more beautiful, more alive. life as it came, with its limitations, its routines, its little joys, and its many challenges. But now, something had changed. Silently, deeply, irrevocably. And it wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about those coins, that box, that hidden letter. It was about life finally looking at it and saying, I see you. I've always seen it. I never forgot you. Emily took a deep breath, feeling every cell in your body being filled with a different piece of a lightness that for a long time she didn't even know what it was like to feel. He got up, slowly, without rushing. He went to the kitchen and he began calmly to prepare some bread. I kneaded the dough with slow, gentle, circular movements, feeling with each touch the texture changing, transforming, becoming something new. Just like your own life, that little by little was being shaped, transformed by the invisible hands of fate. While the bread rose, rested, she opened the windows, letting the wind come in, go through every corner of the house, bringing that smell of morning, of life, of new beginnings, and then decided it was time to return to the mansion. Not because I needed to work, but because there was something inside her that knew that chapter was not yet completely written. He dressed himself in that same navy blue uniform, the one who for so many years carried with him like a kind of invisible armor, which made her part of the scenery and at the same time invisible to him. But now, something was different. She knew inside her. She knew drove through the quiet streets of Willow Creek, looking at the same trees, the same houses, the same corners, but everything seemed new. Arriving at the Thompson mansion, he parked in the same place as always. He went down, took a deep breath, and he walked slowly to the side gate. The sound of the intercom, the click of the gate unlocking, the path through the garden with its perfectly pruned flowers, everything looked exactly the same, and at the same time, completely different. Upon entering, he felt that smell, a mix of antique wooden furniture, expensive perfumes, freshly brewed coffee, and those old walls that held more secrets than anyone could imagine. Emily walked through the halls. Each step echoed differently, because now she was no longer just the maid. He approached the office, that same place where days before I had found the box, the coins, the letter, the secret that would change his life forever. She stood still for a few seconds at the door, watching, feeling. He took a deep breath and went inside. The room was exactly as she remembered. The soft light coming through the windows, the smell of polished wood, of old books, and that silence, that kind of silence that doesn't weigh, doesn't scare, doesn't bother, But yes, it calms, it envelops, it embraces. Emily walked slowly to the bookshelf, the same one where you found the hidden compartment. He ran his hand gently over the wood, as someone who thanks, as someone who says goodbye, as someone who honors. And then, without even realizing it, he whispered, "Thanks." He stayed there for a few minutes, simply feeling, allowing that reality, that new life, that new path. If you could settle lightly, serenely inside it. When leaving the office, he walked around the house, observing every detail, every piece of furniture, every photograph on the walls. All that was part of his story, of a story that for so many years she lived silently behind the scenes. He passed through the dining room, the kitchen, the back garden. Each place brought back memories of distant laughter, of washed dishes, of waxed floors, of folded clothes, of years and more years, of a dedicated life, of a presence that even though it is invisible to the eyes of others, it was always there, firm, constant, present. And at that moment, Emily realized something so simple, and at the same time so grand, that all that, every moment, every gesture, every job done, it was never in vain, because life was watching, the universe was watching, God was watching, and now everything was coming back in the form of a blessing, of a reward, of recognition. She smiled, that light smile, sincere, full of peace, and with a heart serene, peaceful, full of gratitude. He turned around and slowly he walked back home, with the certainty that from then on, the best of your life, it was just getting started. The way back home seemed longer, but not in that heavy, tiring way. It was a long, pleasant, almost meditative. Emily drove slowly, letting the wind come in through the open windows that would gently ruffle your hair, and that he would take along with him any trace of doubt, of fear, of uncertainty. The trees swayed slowly, the sky, tinged with a soft blue, with scattered clouds, seemed to smile at every detail of the landscape, of the flowers, of the birds, of the houses. It seemed suddenly more alive, more beautiful, more full of meaning. When he got home, he parked his old car in the same place as always. He went down, took a deep breath, and for a few seconds, she simply stood there, looking at her little house. That simple little house, made of old wood, with small windows. That, for so many years, was your refuge, your safety, your world. But now, she knew that that world was about to get much bigger. He entered, closed the door with that familiar, almost welcoming creak. He took off his shoes, as he always did, and he walked slowly into the room. The smell of wood, of plants, of tea, Everything seemed more intense, more present, more comforting. He sat down in the armchair near the window. That same one, where so many times he watched life go by, dreaming, imagining, wishing. But now, it wasn't just a dream anymore. It was reality. A reality that, although it seemed like a dream, was there, palpable, concrete, alive. He closed his eyes. He took a deep breath and let that feeling of peace, of gratitude, of lightness, if it spread all over the body. I felt the air coming in, fresh, filling my lungs, and as I let go, it seemed like each exhale took away years and more years of tiredness, of worries, of fear. It stayed like that for a few minutes, maybe more, without thinking, without planning, just feeling. The sound of the wind, of the leaves swaying, these birds' song outside. Everything mixed together, forming a soft melody, a symphony of peace, of calm, of comfort. And then, slowly, he opened his eyes and he looked at his notebook, the same one where it was written at the top of the page, EC, smiled, a smile full of meaning, of hope, of gratitude. He picked up a pen and he began, slowly, to write a new list. No more of what if, but yes of it will happen. I'm going to buy my dream house. I will have a garden full of flowers. I will help my sister. I'm going to take that trip I've always wanted. I'm going to open my own coffee shop. I will live with freedom, peace, and gratitude every day. Every word, every line seemed more than ink on paper. It was as if she was there, in that moment, drawing, creating, manifesting her new future. And as I wrote, I felt something much bigger, much deeper, growing inside her. One thing is for sure, a trust and unshakable faith that, yes, life was finally giving her back everything that for so long she had sown. Love, honest work, dedication, patience, resilience. All this now came back in the form of a blessing, of an opportunity, of a new beginning. Emily got up, went to the kitchen. He put the kettle on, and while I waited, I looked out the window. The sky was beginning to take on golden, orange, pinkish tones. That sunset that seemed more beautiful than ever. The smell of boiling water mixed with the smell of flowers, of grass, of earth, and that feeling of home, of security, of peace. It was almost tangible. Prepared your tea. He sat down in the armchair again. He held the cup with both hands. And he stood there, simply contemplating the sky changing color, the stars starting to appear, one by one, slowly, like little promises, little confirmations that everything was finally in the right place. And as he watched, he let his mind float, travel gently through possibilities, through dreams, along paths. I was thinking about what it would be like choosing a house. What would it be like to wake up and to know that you no longer had to worry about rent money, about overdue bills, about expenses that never seemed to fit into your salary? She thought about what it would be like to see her sister smiling, relieved, knowing that now they could together live a lighter, more peaceful life. She thought about the coffee shop, the one she had dreamed of for so long, with large windows, natural light, shelves full of books, the smell of coffee, of cake fresh out of the oven, and people arriving, staying, talking, smiling. Every thought, every image seemed more real, more possible, closer, and in that moment, Emily realized that more than anything, she was finally free. Free to dream, to choose, to live. The sky, now dark, full of stars, seemed to smile at her. The wind caressed her face, as if saying softly, "Yes, you did it. Now rest. Life takes care of the rest." And slowly, Emily closed her eyes. The cup is still warm in your hands. The body completely relaxed. The mind serene, calm, light, and for the first time in a long, long time, he fell asleep. Not because he was tired, not because he was exhausted, but yes, for peace, for fulfillment, for gratitude, while out there, the wind continued, blowing gently. The stars were shining, and the entire universe seemed to be smiling at her at that moment. The next morning arrived, slow, serene, like a loving whisper of life itself. The sky tinged with soft shades of light blue and gray. It was calm, clean. The wind blew, gently passing through the leaves, drawing small movements that looked more like silent dances. Emily woke up, not in a hurry, not with that weight, that tightness, but with that lightness, that feeling that for the first time in many years, everything was exactly as it should be. She remained lying down for a few minutes, looking at the ceiling, watching the morning light. He entered slowly through the gaps in the curtain, drawing golden beams that seemed to float in the air. He took a deep breath, letting the fresh morning air fill your body, and as he let go, he felt as if each breath was a way of giving thanks, of connecting, of simply existing. The sound of birds outside, the smell of wet earth, of grass, of flowers, everything formed a soft melody, a soundtrack of peace, of comfort, of life. He got up slowly, stepping on the cold floor, which somehow felt cozier, more familiar. He went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and while he waited, he opened the window, letting the wind bring a little more of that peace, of that lightness, of that good smell, of the morning, of home, of life, the smell with that unmistakable scent of possibilities, he sat down at the kitchen table, and once again, he opened his notebook, that one where days ago I had written at the top of the page, "Jisse," smiled a peaceful smile, full of meaning, and slowly he scratched that expression, and in its place he wrote, in large letters, "Firm, serene." Now it's real. He stayed for a few minutes, just looking at those words, letting each letter, each stroke, settle deep inside your mind, your heart, your soul. Because yes, now it was real. It was no longer a distant dream. It was no longer a vague possibility, a timid hope. It was concrete, palpable, true. And as he held the pen, he realized that for the first time in a long time, his hand didn't shake. His heart wasn't beating fast. There was just calm, pure, serene, welcoming, calm. He picked up the phone, dialed, and on the other end, Michael's voice answered. That voice, that just hearing it, already brought that feeling of security, of support, of care. "Good morning, Mr. Michael," he said, with that soft tone that now seemed even more full of hope. "Good morning, Emily," he replied, with that smile that goes through even the telephone lines. "Did you sleep well?" She smiled. "It's been a long time since I've slept." Michael laughed softly, and then, with that gentle, serene way, he continued, "Emily, we have good news. The documents were analyzed, and everything confirms, exactly as we imagined. The coins were never recorded as part of the family's assets. Mr. Roberts' will makes no mention of it." He paused and added, with that almost poetic tone, "which means that, yes, legally, this treasure is yours. For a few seconds, maybe more, time simply ceased to exist." Emily closed her eyes. She felt her entire body fill with a sensation that she didn't even know existed, a mix of peace, gratitude, freedom, a lightness so great that it seemed that his body was floating on the other end of the line. Michael continued, "We will now begin the formal procedures so that everything is registered correctly in your name. It will be a smooth process, and in the meantime, you can start planning everything you've always wanted." Emily smiled, a smile that seemed to illuminate even the walls of the house. "I don't even know how to thank Mr. Michael, really," he responded with that tone of someone who understands, of someone who welcomes, of someone who celebrates together. "Emily, life sometimes makes a point of giving back in the same measure everything that we give it." They said goodbye, and as she hung up, Emily remained there for a few minutes, or maybe more, looking through the window to the sky, to the trees, to the leaves that danced gently with the wind. And in that moment, she realized that everything she thought was impossible, unattainable, distant, now it was part of his life. He closed his eyes. He took a deep breath and left. That feeling of peace, of gratitude, of lightness, if it spread through every cell in your body. The sound of the wind, the smell of grass, the bird song, everything seemed like a song made just for her, just for that moment, and for the first time in a long, long time. She whispered to herself, very softly, almost like a prayer, almost like a hug. Thank you, life. Thank you. And at that moment, Emily knew with every fiber of her being that from then on, the best was yet to come. The day went on, slow, calm, serene, as if time itself knew that at that moment, life was writing a new chapter. Emily stayed for a few minutes, or maybe longer, sitting in your armchair near the window, looking simply, the wind shaking the leaves, the sky tinged with soft shades of blue, and that sun filtering its rays in such a delicate way that it seemed to caress everything it touched. The sound of birds, the smell of flowers, of grass, of wet earth, everything formed a soft, hypnotic melody, almost like a hug from nature itself. He took out his notebook, the same one where before he wrote, "What if?" and then, "Now it's real." He opened it to the page where his lists, his dreams, his possibilities were written, and for a few minutes he just stared, letting each word, each line become more than a wish. It was becoming reality now. All this is happening, he thought, and he smiled with that smile that only someone carries in their chest immense gratitude can have. Can you really understand? He got up, walked slowly to the kitchen. He made some coffee, let the smell spread, fill every corner of the house, while organizing mentally the next steps. Maybe it's time to start looking for my new home, he thought, and that thought came accompanied by a lightness, by happiness that seemed to dance along with the smell of coffee. He sat down with the cup in his hands, and slowly he started researching on the old computer. Kind of slow, but that day seemed to work faster, as if even he knew that that moment was different, special, unique, typed. Homes for sale in Willow Creek, and little by little, images began to appear. Big houses, small houses, modern houses, rustic houses. Each one seemed to tell a story. Each photo carried a promise, a possibility, a new beginning. And then his eyes stopped on an image, a house made of white wood, large windows with blue frames, a garden full of flowers, a porch with a rocking chair, and in the background, trees, lots of trees, and that sky, so open, so blue. His heart raced, but not in that anxious way. It was a different acceleration, as if something inside her said, "It's here, this is it, it's your home." Clicked on the photo, looked at every detail. The kitchen, full of natural light, the living room, with fireplace, light walls, wooden furniture, spacious rooms, windows that opened onto the garden, and, best of all, a small studio in the back. Perfect for that dream coffee shop, or maybe a reading room, a meditation room, or who knows, just a space to be everything that she wanted, that she chose, that she imagined. The phone was there on the screen. The real estate number. Emily took a deep breath. You felt that chill in your stomach, but this time it wasn't fear, it wasn't insecurity, it was excitement. It was that good kind of anxiety, the one that comes when life smiles at you. Dialed the sound of the line ringing, and then on the other end, a friendly voice answered, "Hello, this is Willow Homes Real Estate. Good morning." Emily smiled, and he answered with that tone, sweet, calm, full of hope. "Good morning. My name is Emily. I would like to schedule a visit to a house I saw on the website." The attendant confirmed the address, and a few minutes later, everything was set. It hung up and stayed there for a few seconds, looking at the screen, looking at that house. "It's here. I feel it. It's here," I thought. Closed the computer. He got up, walked to the window, and he just stood there, looking. The wind gently swayed the leaves. The sky seemed to smile. And at that moment, Emily realized that life was literally giving her everything that for so long she had only dared to dream. In silence, he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and left that feeling of gratitude, of peace, of happiness. If it spread all over your body, and as the wind caressed her face, and the sound of birds filled the morning silence, Emily knew with all the certainty in the world that from then on the best was yet to come. The morning continued, soft, calm, as if each second was drawn with the tip of a brush, immersed in serenity. Emily was getting ready. No rush, no anxiety, just with that lightness that only arrives when life starts to smile back. He got dressed. He chose a simple outfit, comfortable, a light blouse, light fabric pants, and that old pair of sneakers that accompanied her for so many years. seemed to have a different meaning, because now she was no longer just going through the days. She was starting a new chapter. She grabbed her bag, locked the door, and for a few seconds she stood still in front of her little house, looking, breathing, feeling. The wind walked through the trees. The leaves danced slowly in the sky, so blue, so open, seemed to applaud discreetly that new journey. He got into the car, turned on the engine, and on he went through the quiet streets of Willow Creek, observing every house, every garden, every detail, as if realizing that everything now has a different tone. Arrived at the real estate agency. He parked, took a deep breath, and with that smile that only those who carry hope in their chest know, pushed the door. The soft sound of the bell hanging from the door frame echoed. That sound that seemed more like the sign that, yes, everything was starting exactly as it should. She was greeted by a nice girl with an easy smile, bright eyes. Her name was Sophie. "You must be Emily," she said, extending her hand with that welcoming, gentle tone. "Yes, I am," Emily replied, shaking Sophie's hand. "Nice to meet you. The pleasure is all mine," Sophie said with that smile that conveys more than sympathy, conveys care, empathy, affection. They then went together to Sophie's car, and they continued towards the house, the one that from the first moment had made his heart beat differently. The path seemed like a walk. The two were talking softly about the city, about the trees, about how that day was simply perfect, until a few minutes later, the car turned down a small road surrounded by trees. And there, around the bend, she appeared, at home, white with blue framed windows, a wide porch with a rocking chair, and that garden full of flowers of bright, vibrant colors. Emily was simply silent, observing, absorbing, feeling. It was as if that house wasn't just a building, but yes, a hug, a home that somehow was there, waiting for her all this time. They got out of the car and slowly they walked to the front door. The sound of footsteps on gravel, the smell of flowers mixed with the smell of wood, of the wind, of the earth. Everything seemed perfect. Sophie opened the door, and immediately that smell of home, of comfort, of peace, it invaded gently Emily's senses. He entered slowly, observing every detail. The natural light that filled the rooms, the windows that let the wind in, the floor, light wood, the walls in soft tones. Everything seemed to have been carefully thought out. exactly what she always dreamed of. He walked around the room, through the kitchen, through the rooms. He touched with his fingertips the door frames, the walls, the furniture, as if confirming to herself that, yes, that is real. When they reached the back porch, the sound of the wind, of the leaves, of the birds, it became even more present, more intense, more cozy. There was there a small building, a studio, all glass, overlooking the garden, the trees, the sky. And at that very moment, Emily no longer had any doubts, no uncertainty. It's here. This is it. It's my home, he thought, with his heart absolutely full. Sophie, who was watching with that look of someone who understands, of someone who perceives. He smiled and said softly, "I think this house was waiting for you." Emily looked at her, and holding back the tears, that kind of tears that are not of sadness, nor of pain, but yes, of gratitude, of love, of fulfillment, he replied, almost like a whisper, "I think so too." They stayed there for a few more minutes, on the balcony, feeling the wind, listening to the sounds of nature, letting that moment be engraved deeply in the memory, in the soul, in the heart. And then they came back. Sophie took the papers, explained the whole process, and with that smile that seems more like a blessing than a gesture, "These, Emily, if you want, this house can be yours today." Emily took a deep breath. He looked once again at every corner, every detail, every flower, every window, every space, and with a voice full of certainty, of love, of gratitude, he replied, "I want." And at that moment, there, under that blue sky, with the wind, walking among the leaves, the sound of birds, enlivening the moment, Emily knew, with every fiber of her being, that, yes, life had finally given him the home that since always it had been hers. The sound of the wind, the smell of flowers, the gentle touch of the breeze on your face, everything seemed to celebrate that moment, as if the universe itself was smiling, applauding, in silence, that new page that life was now writing. Emily stood there for a few minutes, or maybe more, simply observing, feeling, absorbing every detail of that house, every corner, every space, the sound of birds, the smell of wood, the swaying of the leaves that danced to the rhythm of the wind. And inside her, there was such a great peace, such deep gratitude that seemed not to fit in the chest. Sophie, with that welcoming smile, kind, understanding, he began to explain the next steps, the documents, the signatures, the procedures. But even as he spoke, he seemed to understand that that moment went far beyond contracts, bureaucracy, because when life decides to deliver that which was kept waiting for so long, no paperwork, no rules, no process, it is capable of diminishing the size of the miracle. Emily signed with steady hands, a light heart, and that smile that wouldn't leave his face. It's real, I thought. All of this is real. And with each signature, with each page, it was as if she were saying to herself and to the world, I deserve it. I accept it. I receive. With an open heart, with gratitude, with love, with peace. When the last paper was signed, Sophie stood up. He took out a small envelope, and with that sparkle in the eyes that only those who truly love what they do can have, he held out the envelope toward Emily. Inside it was the key to that new beginning, to that new life, to that new home. Emily held for a few seconds, just looked. That key, simple, small, but for her, it meant everything. He held it against his chest. He closed his eyes and left. That feeling of gratitude, of love, of deserving, if it spread through every cell of your body, the wind blew softer, lighter, as if I also wanted to participate in that moment. Sophie smiled, and with that sweet, calm voice, he said, welcome. Emily, welcome to your new home. Emily opened her eyes. He looked into Sophie's eyes, and holding back the tears, he replied, almost like a whisper, thank you. Really? Thank you. They left together, walking slowly to the car. The sun filtered its rays between the trees, drawing shadows, lights, shapes that seemed almost magical. The journey back was silent, but not that empty, uncomfortable silence. It was that good silence, full of meaning, of contemplation. Emily looked out the window, and every tree, every flower, every house, it seemed to smile at her, as if to say it saw. Life never forgot you. She was just preparing everything at the right time, in the right way, for you upon arriving home. Emily went downstairs. He thanked Sophie with a tight hug, sincere, full of gratitude. Then she stood for a few minutes in front of her old little house, looking at her as if saying goodbye, but at the same time giving thanks for everything, for every day lived there, for every sunrise, every sunset, for every cup of tea, every bread needed, every tear, every smile, because that little house was, for so many years, his refuge, his fortress, his home, and now it would give way to a new home, a new chapter. He took a deep breath. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you, my little house. Thank you for everything." He entered, and as he walked through those small rooms, every wall, every piece of furniture, every smell seemed to say goodbye. Made a coffee. He sat down for the last time in his favorite armchair near the window, and he stood there looking, contemplating. The wind swayed the curtains. The sun came in, drawing golden beams on the ground, and in that moment, she realized that life wasn't just handing him a new home. I was giving him a new life. A life where she was no longer invisible. It was no longer just the maid. Now she was the owner of her own story, and as the wind walked gently among the leaves and the sky was tinged with golden orange tones, Emily knew with every fiber of her being that from then on, the best was yet to come. The next day arrived with that silence, which is not the absence of sound, but yes, presence of peace, of lightness, of new beginnings. The wind blew slowly, swaying, the leaves drawing soft movements, as if the world itself had decided to dance to the rhythm of serenity. Emily woke up with eyes still closed. She remained lying down, listening, feeling, breathing, the sound of birds outside, the smell of the neighbor's coffee, mixed with the smell of wet earth, the slight creaking of the wood when the wind passed through the crack in the window, and for a few minutes, it was just like that, present, whole, connected with that moment. Today begins my new chapter, he thought, and he smiled, that smile that comes from deep inside, full of gratitude, of love, of peace. He got up, walked around the house, that house, which for so many years was his refuge, his shelter, his home, and now it was about to become a sweet memory, a piece of a story that she would carry forever in her heart. Prepared some tea. He sat down in the armchair near the window, the same one where you spent so many mornings, looking, dreaming, imagining. But that day, it wasn't about dreaming anymore. It was about living, about achieving, about embracing every possibility that now was real. The phone rang. Era Sophie. That voice, already so familiar, so welcoming. "Good morning, Emily," she said, with that tone full of joy. "Are you ready to get the keys to your new house?" Emily smiled, a smile that even Sophie could feel on the other end of the line. "Very ready," she replied, with that voice, serene, calm, full of gratitude. They set the time, and after hanging up, Emily remained for a few minutes, simply staring, looking at that house, for every wall, every piece of furniture, every detail, and quietly, almost like a prayer, almost like a whisper, he said, "Thank you. Thank you for protecting me, for welcoming me, for being my home for so long." He kept his few things, some clothes, books, photographs, souvenirs, and with each object that he picked up, he would pause for a moment. I looked, smiled, and thanked, because each thing carried a story, a memory, a part of who she was, of who she became. When he finished, he took a deep breath. He looked once more at every corner, and with that lump in my throat, which is not from sadness, but from gratitude, he closed the door, and in that moment I knew that was exactly where it was supposed to be, at the right time, in the right place, living what was meant to be hers. He got into the car, and he continued slowly through the quiet streets of Willow Creek, the wind messing up your hair, the sun filtering its rays between the leaves of the trees. And with each kilometer, it seemed that the past was left behind. I don't eat anything heavy, but like a road that gently now said goodbye. Upon arriving at the real estate agency, she was greeted with that warm smile from Sophie, who held in his hands a small envelope. "Here they are," she said with that almost poetic tone. "The keys to your new home." Emily held the envelope, and for a few seconds he just stared, feeling the weight, not of the keys, but of all what they represented: freedom, security, love, belonging. Sophie, realizing that moment, fell silent, just respecting, welcoming, witnessing. Emily took a deep breath, held the keys against his chest. He closed his eyes, and in that moment, it left a wave of gratitude, of love, of joy. If it spread all over your body, the wind outside seemed softer, as if I also wanted to be part of that moment, ready to meet officially your new home, Sophie asked, smiling. Emily opened her eyes, smiled back, and he answered with that voice that now carried more than words. I carried the certainty that, yes, everything was in its place. More than ever, they left together, walking to the car, and during the journey, the silence was filled, not by words, but for smiles, looks, and that energy that only those who know that life has just aligned know. When they turned the last bend, she appeared at home, white, with blue windows, the balcony full of flowers, the garden dancing to the sound of the wind. Emily got out of the car, and for a few seconds she stood there, still, just looking, the heart beating in a calm, steady rhythm, but full full of a joy that seemed not to fit in my chest. He walked to the door. He held the key, and slowly he turned it in the lock. The sound of the click, the sound of the door opening, the smell of that home, new, fresh, clean, full of promises, of possibilities, of love, entered, and with every step, I felt as if that house, I told him quietly, "Welcome, Emily. Welcome. You were expected." He walked through the living room, through the kitchen, through the bedrooms. It touched every wall, every window, every door frame as someone who recognizes not something new, but something that somehow was always yours. He went to the back porch. He looked at the garden, at the glass-enclosed studio, and with teary eyes, that smile that wouldn't leave his face, she whispered to herself, "I achieved." And at that moment, Emily knew with every fiber of her being that, yes, the best was yet to come. The sound of the wind gently swaying the leaves, the smell of flowers, of wood, of wet earth, the sky tinged with light blue, with white clouds, slow, soft. Everything seemed to celebrate that moment, so simple, and at the same time, so grand. Emily walked around the house, through the corridors, through the illuminated rooms, letting her steps draw, slowly, a new story, a new life. Every open window let in not just the wind, but also the certainty that yes, everything was finally in its place. She passed through the kitchen, that kitchen which soon would smell of baking bread, of freshly brewed coffee, of cake coming out of the oven, of conversations, of laughter, of life. He stopped in front of the kitchen window. He looked at the garden, and in that instant, something inside her was filled completely. "I'm home," he thought. "For the first time in my entire life, I am truly home." He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let that feeling of gratitude, of peace, of love, if it spread all over your body, the sound of birds, the swaying of the trees, the smell of nature, of wood, of the sun, everything formed a perfect melody. He walked to the balcony. He sat down in the rocking chair, and it just stood there, simply swaying, slowly, looking, feeling, absorbing. The wind touched her face. The sun caressed her skin, and that silence, that kind of silence that doesn't weigh, doesn't press, but yes, embrace, calm, comfort for a few minutes, or maybe hours. Emily stood there without thinking, without planning, without worrying, just being, just existing, just living. And in that moment, he realized that true wealth goes far beyond coins, houses, is this. It's waking up and feeling peace. It's breathing and feeling gratitude. It's looking around and knowing that you are exactly where you're supposed to be, with a light heart, with a peaceful soul, with the mind in silence, in peace, the sound of nature all around. It was like a song made especially for her. And as I watched, he thought about everything, what he experienced every morning, waking up before the sun, in every wash of clothes, every clean floor, every washed dish, in each day, where she was invisible, just part of the backstage of other people's lives. And now, there she was, sitting on the porch of your own house, breathing, free, light, owner of your story. The wind brought with it the smell of grass, the smell of flowers, of wood, of sun, and that smell felt like a reminder. It's all right now. You got it. Life never forgot you. She was just waiting for the right moment to give you all of this. Emily closed her eyes, and he let that moment be engraved deeply in his heart, in his soul. The sound of the rocking chair coming and going, the sound of the wind, of the leaves, of the birds, everything formed a symphony of peace. And in that moment, she understood that it wasn't just about having a house. It wasn't just about having money. It was about finally finding a place where she could just be, being who she is. No rush, no fear, no invisibility. For the first time in your entire life, she no longer needed to prove anything, explain nothing, run, strive beyond your own limits. She just needed to exist, breathe, smile, live. And at that moment, Emily did exactly that. He took a deep breath, let the wind bring a little more of that peace, that the sound of the trees lulls a little more, that lightness, and he smiled a smile that was more than a smile. It was a silent declaration. I'm alive. I am at peace. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. And as the rocking chair continued, gently in its movement, as the wind caressed her face, as the sun said goodbye, slowly dyeing the sky, gold, orange, pink, Emily knew with every cell of her body that from then on, the best was yet to come. Time seemed to no longer exist. There, on that porch, in that rocking chair, between the sound of the leaves, the song of the birds, and that gentle wind that came and went, as if cradling your thoughts, your dreams, your soul. The sky was beginning to take on a color of gold, of orange, of pink. The sunset poured its warm light over the garden, over the trees, over every piece of that house, of that home. Emily stood there, looking, feeling, absorbing every detail, every smell, every sound, every sensation. The smell of wood mixed with the smell of flowers, of grass, of damp earth. The sound of the wind shaking the leaves. The song of the birds, which, little by little, were retreating, giving space to the sound of the crickets, of the small insects, which announced the arrival of night. And as I watched, felt a peace so deep, so intense, that seemed not to fit in the chest. A peace that, for the first time in life, I wasn't just hoping, wishing, dreaming, but yes, in reality, in the present, in the now, I did it. I thought I achieved. And in that instant, he realized that it was never just about finding a hidden box. It was never just about coins, about money, about fortune. It was about something much bigger, much deeper, much truer. It was about being seen, to be recognized, to be loved by life itself. It was about the certainty that the universe, God, destiny, they were all the time watching over her, even when she thought she was alone, even when it seemed that nothing would change, even when the doors closed. Life silently was preparing something that now was right there before his eyes, in your hands, in your heart. Emily looked at the garden, to the glass-enclosed studio at the back. For every flower, every tree, every little piece of that place. And you realized that yes, everything there seemed to have been made, thought, dreamed for her. It was like that house, that piece of the world, had all along been there, just waiting for the moment when she would be ready to receive. She got up, walked slowly, barefoot, feeling the cold floor under her feet. He ran his hands over the walls, over the door frames, over the windows. Every touch was a hug, every step a confirmation that, yes, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. He went to the kitchen, opened the windows, let the wind come in, bring a little more of that lightness, of that peace, of that feeling of home. Prepared some tea. As the water heated up, the scent of chamomile spread, filling every corner, every space, mixed with the smell of wood, of flowers, of the night that was arriving. Softly, he sat at the table, the hot cup in the hands, the heat spreading through the fingers, through the chest, through the soul. And as I looked out which now was filling with stars. He whispered softly, almost like a prayer, almost like a thank you, almost like a hug. Thank you, life. Thank you, God. Thank you. The sound of crickets, of leaves, of the wind. It formed a song, soft, hypnotic, welcoming, and in that moment, Emily understood that true fortune, it wasn't in the box, in the coins, in the money. It was exactly there, at that moment, in that hot tea, in that gentle wind, in that house, in that home. It was in every breath, in every smile, in every detail that now was part of his life because, yes, she was the owner of a fortune, but not just a fortune made of gold, of goods, of things. She was the owner of a fortune made of freedom, of peace, of security, of love, of belonging, to know that now I could live in truth. No fear, no rush, without that weight that you carried for so long. And as the sky filled with stars and the wind kept blowing light, soft, cozy, Emily closed her eyes. He took a deep breath and left that feeling of peace, of gratitude, of lightness, if it spread all over the body. The sound of the night, the smell of nature, the warmth of the tea in your hands, everything formed a kind of embrace. And for the first time in a long, long time, or maybe for the first time in my entire life, she allowed herself to simply rest, let go, everything surrender completely to the now, at that moment, to that peace. The chair on the balcony rocked gently. The sound of coming and going mixed with the sound of the wind, to the song of the crickets, to the whisper of the leaves. And there, at that moment, while the universe entire seemed to lull, his sleep, his soul, his heart, Emily fell asleep. No, like someone running away from tiredness, from pain, from life. But yes, as someone who surrenders to peace, to gratitude, to love, fell asleep, knowing that, yes, she was now the owner of her story, and that from then on the best would always be yet to come. And while she slept, the wind kept blowing, the stars were shining, and the universe smiled, whispering softly. For anyone who wanted to listen, life never forgets, life never fails. She just waits for the right moment to deliver to you everything that always